So right as the Four Corners report was coming out, I received a Freedom of Information request from the Queensland Government, which just detailed, it was 1,000 pages of just human rights abuses of what was happening predominantly to Indigenous kids in Queensland, in Cleveland Youth Detention Centre up in Townsville in particular. The use of dogs to scare and intimidate children. Isolation, solitary confinement of Aboriginal kids for up to 10 days straight, 23 hours a day. We're talking invasive search practices, asking kids to strip down and squat when they return from court. Inappropriate use of handcuffs. This is all happening, this was as recent as 2015 from what we've got, and we haven't even got the most recent reports. So I think that, it's clear that this is a national issue. It's clear that this is happening to Indigenous children across Australia, and it shouldn't have to take the bravery of children who have been victim of human rights abuses to speak out for this to be known about, and for communities to get justice, for families like the Voller family to get justice. Why does it have to take, a human rights organisation digging around through, piles of documents which have been lying around on government officials' desks for years, for this to come to light? Like, we need transparency. We need to make sure that our kids are not being tortured in detention any longer. And we don't have to wait for a Royal Commission for that to happen. Australia has obligations under the Optional Protocol and the Convention Against Torture to set up mechanisms so that independent people can get access to detention centres, find out exactly what is happening to the kids, so that, kids like Dylan and other kids exposed to these things have someone that they can actually speak to and get their voices heard, so that our families and our communities are finding out when it's happening, when these abuses are happening, and to actually make sure that any staff that are involved are immediately suspended and investigated independently, which hasn't been happening in an effective way. So, we saw both in Dondale and in Queensland where investigations were done after these human rights abuses came out. There hasn't been the justice that these families deserve. So I think that, Prime Minister Turnbull can easily ratify the Optional Protocol and the Convention Against Torture. We're obviously going through this process now with the Royal Commission, but that's something that's been on the table that they can do to protect kids right now. And we actually have a petition up at the moment, which you can all sign. 39,000 people have signed it already, to call for that protection for kids right now, and to make sure that we get that justice for families. But I think what's really important to talk about is what Indigenous communities are actually doing right now to create this change, and tapping into what Uncle was talking about with the power of culture to heal our kids. And one program up in Cleveland called Red Dust Healing is run by Uncle Randall Ross up there. And he did a program in there which is all about cultural healing. It's all about, giving kids the tools in a culturally appropriate way to deal with the stuff that's going on in their lives. And they ran that in Cleveland, and with 40 kids, and not a single one of those kids went back into detention over a 2-year period. Like, that's success. Like, we know that locking kids up doesn't work. We know that throwing them behind bars doesn't help kids like Dylan, like all these other kids who are labelled with the word criminal, like you were saying, Kira. But actually, it's a kid that has other stuff going on in their lives that needs the support to be able to deal with those issues. And what Amnesty International is saying is that Indigenous communities have the answers. Indigenous communities know what works for their kids. And it's about actually funding and supporting and giving control back to our communities to be able to do what we know is going to work for kids.